Oh, I think it's letting us do it. Beautiful. All right. So let's start. Today's discussion is the discussion of the mitzvah of loving the convert. So I haven't forgotten what we've mentioned the previous weeks. We started off the discussion last week about the fundamental belief in connecting to God through understanding, connecting to the righteous people. I was going to do a part 2 on that, which was talking to people once they have passed on, but lockdown hit and I didn't have enough time to prepare something that heavy. So I thought I'd go with something a bit heavier and do the convert talk. No, actually, to the next mitzvah 9. It's actually a follow-on, interestingly enough. In the order of mitzvahs that I'm using, they put the mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew right after the mitzvah of connecting to Hashem through connecting to the righteous people. And I thought, should we do the mitzvah of loving Hashem? Well, we've done it from the Tanya's perspective, so we've already touched on that. And the next mitzvah is the mitzvah of loving the convert. So I thought that loving the convert is a good connection from what we've been discussing in the past few weeks. So let's make it happen. The mitzvah to love the convert. Let me show you what I'm talking about, and you will see for yourselves. The direct mitzvah from the Torah. Did I take the wrong pasuk? Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
I hope so. Okay, it says as follows. Vahavtem et hager. This is in Deuteronomy, Devarim, verse 19, verse 19, chapter 10 of Deuteronomy. It says clearly, Vahavtem et hager. You shall love the ger, love the convert. That's the commandment. What's the reason the Torah gives? Because you were converts yourselves in the land of Israel. Now, what does the word ger actually mean? If you take the following part, gerim, what does it mean that we were gerim in the land of Egypt? We were strangers. Over here it says you should love the stranger. But generally a ger means the convert. And that's an interesting way of how we understand what the meaning of a ger. A ger is a foreigner. A person that is not a naturally born to that particular place, area, religion, or whatever it may be. So it's telling us that just like when you were in Egypt, you wanted to be treated well. The way you can, you've experienced what it means to be mistreated, therefore you have an extra obligation to make sure to treat people properly. This is, of course, a very general rule. It doesn't apply only to converts. This law applies to all people that feel out of place. You know, if you've ever gone through immigration, as whether it's a child or an adult, you would know that immigration is one of the hardest things that for many people do, particularly if you're older. Particularly if you speak a foreign language, if you come from a foreign language country, it's really could be really tough. You can feel really out of the picture. I think today's day and age, when most people speak English, even before they come to Australia, it's possibly a little bit different, but still, it's very difficult for them. So this concept of when you see somebody that is a stranger, that is different to you, particularly, this is talking about the ger, as in the ger tzedek, the Jewish ger, the person that is the foreigner, but it would apply to any type of foreigner, person that feels out of place. It's like that feeling when you, if you were a child and you had to change schools, and after being in one school for many years, you had to go to a different school. You could just imagine how difficult that would have been for many kids. It's a difficult change, and the person that has the guts to go and stick up for that new kid that nobody wants to, that hasn't yet made it part of the clique or whatever it is, That's something special. That's the particular mitzvah that's connected to here. So let's look at a little bit of the history of Gerim, converts. I want to just mention a few names that you should be aware of. I want to just show you something. Hold on a second to do it. Excuse me for scrolling down. Okay, I just want to quickly show you Rashi. I'm not going to get into this, but it says, Kigerim ayitim, the Rashi says, Mum shebacha al temar lechavercha, do not reproach others with your own defect. Now, I'm going to get back to what that means in a moment, but before I go off the screen, I want to show that to you. Okay. So what makes the ger? Who is the ger? What are we trying to do? All these we will talk more about in a moment. But first, I want to discuss with you historically, who were the gerim? Who were these people that were gerim? The truth is that the Jewish people, in a certain sense, we started off as gerim. So it says, you as the Jewish people started off as converts, as strangers in Egypt. You were a foreign people. You became a people as a foreigner amongst another nation. That's your history. That's where you began. And you were mistreated over there in Egypt because of your difference. And therefore, it's telling us that we have to just take extra care to love the people that are different to us. We're told that not only that, when the Jewish people left Egypt, we had foreigners that had joined on to us. The Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, right? Moshe wanted to bring them along with us. Others did not. Hashem was not necessarily so happy about it, but Moshe felt it would be good. And some of them were good, some of them were not good. Some of these people were not honest converts, and they caused a lot of trouble for the Jewish people. And Moshe learned it later on. And some of them were very honest converts and brought tremendous blessing. And it's from that point on that we really learned the concept of accepting converts, not just to jump at the idea of accepting anybody that wants to convert, because just because somebody wants to convert doesn't mean that they are sincere about it and they're going to bring blessings and goodness for the Jewish community. So that's something that you have to be aware of. What we're not going to discuss, at least not initially, that's not the topic of our discussion, is conversion in general. That's a topic in and of itself. We could maybe touch on areas connected to conversion, but that's not the main concept. Today we want to focus on the actual mitzvah of when you have somebody that has converted, that we have a special mitzvah to so special love. What we're going to see that's unique about the mitzvah of loving the ger, the convert, is that when you show love to a convert, you're doing a double mitzvah. When you show love to a regular Jew, you fulfill the mitzvah of Yahavta l'reacha kamocha, loving your fellow as yourself, a great mitzvah. When you love the convert and the person is converted to Judaism, not only doing the mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew, you're also doing the mitzvah of loving the convert. So it's a double whammy. It's a double header. You always automatically do two mitzvahs. So some great people have historically come from converts. So of course we know that Ruth, who is the legend of the story of the book of Ruth, and who's also the ancestor of King David, she herself was a convert. Not only was she a convert, but from her we learn a lot about what conversion means. For example, when she is about to leave, when her mother-in-law, Naomi, tries to tell her to leave, and her sister, Orpah, decides to leave, what does Ruth say? Ruth says, your God is my God, your land is my land, where you die is where I die. Your burial place is my burial place. which basically teaches us that one of the main premises of a person wanting to convert is they have to accept upon themselves every single thing from the beginning of birth, all of the Torah and mitzvot, which is understanding that sometimes it's easier to be born into Judaism than to convert. In a sense that if you want to convert, you can't just say, I'll convert, but I'll pick and choose which mitzvahs I want to do. No, you don't have the choice. If you're doing it all the way. If you're born Jewish, you can't get out of it. So it's not that you really have a choice. You also don't have a choice. You're not supposed to have a choice. But at the end of the day, it's not as though somebody can come and say to you, sorry, you're not a Jew if you don't fulfill particular mitzvot. Because as Jewish people, the fact that you're born a Jew makes you 100% Jewish, whether you do the mitzvah or not. But if you want to choose to become a Jew, you have to do it all the way. And that we learn primarily from Ruth. And Ruth then becomes not just the mother of all converts, so to speak. She also becomes the mother of two of the greatest Jewish people in all of history, namely King David. She is the great grandmother of King David, and she's also given the blessing of being the great, being a descendant of King. You see this really special, unique connection between conversion and our great kings, our great redeemers. We're told that two things will be eternal. There'll be a few things that will be eternal, the Torah tells us. One of the principles of Maimonides is that the Torah is eternal, the Jewish people is eternal, and the monarchy, the kingdom of King David is eternal. Not as in the kingship of King David is eternal, but also that it's so eternal that it will go to his child Mashiach.
Mashiach ben David.
Mashiach ben David. Right? So Mashiach, it's a fundamental principle in Judaism that he has to be from David, and David had to come from conversion of Ruth. So that's, of course, the most famous, most important when we talk about the converts, but there's many other famous ones. Just to mention a few, at the end of the shir, I will tell you the story of Onkelos, just in case you haven't heard it, because it's an important one. But before I get to that, I want to just mention, first of all, Rabbi Akiva. Apparently, according to some commentaries, both of his parents were converts. Then famously, Nebuzradan. Who was Nebuzradan? Nebuzradan was the general that conquered and destroyed the first temple. He was the general of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And after he saw the destruction and what he had done, whatever it was, he decided to convert in private, went into hiding, and privately went and converted to Islam, to Judaism. How did that slip? I don't know. That's maybe thinking of Shabtai Tzvi, one of the persons that went the other directions. Another famous person, and this is not so well documented, but it's believed that I mentioned this last week, that's why I'm just going to mention it, that the emperor in the time of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, we spoke about him last week, many people think it was Marcus Antonius or Marcus Aurelius. Which one is it? Yeah, one of those. One of the Marcuses. Or in English, in Hebrew, he's just known as Antoninus. Okay. I mentioned Onkelos, and I'll tell you the story of him later, but I want to move on. There's a few other famous ones that we have to be aware of, and that is none other than the grandchildren of Haman. The Talmud tells us that the grandchildren of Haman and the grandchildren, not only of Haman, of Sisera, are studying and teaching today in the land of Israel. That's in the times of the Talmud, that Haman's grandchildren, somehow, some of them survived and became converts, which is a very interesting concept, because we know that Haman was part of the surviving people from Amalek, those of Amalek that survived from the destruction of King Shaul. King Saul was supposed to wipe them out, but he left the king and a sheep alive, and they had sheep was a witch, which had changed herself into the body of a sheep, good old Harry Potter, um, and through doing so, they were able to have a child, and that's where the continuation of the kingdom of Amalek resprouts and regroups and becomes a whole another nation, and Haman is that continuation. Nevertheless, we see that they have great-grandchildren that become Jews. What does that mean? Do we have to destroy those people? Of course not. And while I'm at that, this week's parsha, this week's shul, as I mentioned a week and a half ago in shul, that there is one Torah reading that, according to almost all opinions, is the most important Torah reading of the entire year. Of course, the Torah reading when we complete the Torah and Simchat Torah is extremely important, and Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and Shavuot when we do the receiving of the Torah. But the only one that is biblical is, according to many opinions, the Torah reading of this coming Shabbos. So let us pray that Mr. Dan Andrews will allow us to congregate in our synagogues and actually, sorry, I shouldn't just say Dan Andrews, but whatever the situation is, that we should be able to come and listen to the Torah reading this Shabbos in shul, because if you were to choose 1 week that you will come to shul, that to congregate in shuls to hear Parshat Zachor. That is the portion of Amalek, which we do famously once a year as a biblical commandment on the Shabbos before Purim, because Haman is the descendant of Amalek.
But I want to ask you, if we are to forget the Amalekites, why do we keep reading about them?
Forget, not forget. The mitzvah is not to forget. The mitzvah is to remember them.
Yeah.
Right.
Supposed to eradicate them.
And to eradicate them, not to eradicate their memory, to eradicate their existence.
However, Fritz's question is still a very good one, because there's also we talk about wiping out the name of Haman.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. So I think I get your question, but could you elaborate it on it? Just a little more.
Well, if we want to erase the memory of of an evil person, and we do that with Haman, we say Yimach Shmoy regarding Hitler. So surely a way, I can see Fritz's point, a way to erase the memory is to just stop mentioning them.
But you can't forget, or it's going to repeat.
Let's repeat anyway.
That's why it's important to remember.
So what do you think the mitzvah? You're right. So it seems to be a contradiction, Joe. And now brings another point we have to remember. So when it comes to Amalek, the mitzvah of Amalek is to remember Amalek. One of that, it's one of those 6 remembrances we're supposed to say about every day, and remember Amalek to eradicate them. And they are the very definition of evil and cold evil, just for the sake of evil.
Would
Like
that justify?
Hitler is just plain evil, right? When you think of Hitler, a person that just wants to do bad for no other reason other than to do bad, just to kill for the sake of killing, that's Amalek. So Amalek is not just a people, but more than a people, it's a concept. And that has to be eradicated, that concept of doing evil for the sake of doing evil.
Would it justify to go to Iran and get rid of the people who rule Iran?
If you were certain that they were Amalek and the ramifications of Amalek, possibly, yeah. Well, they sound like it, don't they? When they say we want to destroy Israel, for what reason do they want to destroy Israel? What has Israel done wrong to them that they want to destroy us? And they go on TV saying we're going to destroy Israel. We're going to destroy the Jewish people. Why would they say that? That's exactly what Amalek is. Amalek is that they want to destroy something that's good for no other reason other than they can't stand something good. That's Amalek. And that
It's happening now every day. It's happening now every day.
That's it. It's scary. In the Talmud it says, and I forget the source, exact page in the Talmud that it says this, but it says in the Talmud, who is Amalek today? Where's Amalek today? And it says Germania, Germany. Does that mean that all Germans are Amalek? No, it means that there's an element of Amalek left in Germany, and you saw that in Germany, and you saw it in Russia, in Stalin Russia, and throughout the ages, it comes up in different places. And I think you saw it more clearly in Germany than anywhere else, where one man convinced hundreds of thousands of people that for the very sake that these people that are Jewish, we have to destroy them for no other reason other than the fact that they're Jewish. That's evil in its purest form. That has to be eradicated. That has to be killed and wiped out. There's no space for that. Okay? There's no innocence in that. So you say to me, King Saul was punished, that the monarchy was taken away. Why? Because he left some animals alive and he left the king. What could be so bad about that? Yeah, but you know how many Jews died as a result of that? It was displaced mercy. A leader should not have displaced mercy. He had mercy on people that you should not, on existence you should have. God says eradicate them. It's not logical in our PC world where everyone says politically, it's not the politically correct thing to say to kill people, to destroy people. But if their very essence stands for our eradication, and that's what their very being is, then there's no space to be PC. When you become politically correct in this type of circumstances, like King Saul was, then Jews die. That's what happened, and that's what happened. That's what's the story of Amalek? I'm allowing ourselves to go on this tangent because it's directly connected to this week, even though it's a total tangent from our shir, but it is an important subject and very much connected to the times. Who were Amalek? Amalek were the people that when the Jewish people came out of the desert, they had witnessed tremendous miracles. They had witnessed the splitting of the sea, the exodus from Egypt, something which is just absolutely miraculous throughout the entire world. Everyone is afraid of them, and the Amalekites say, "Hey, let's go and kill them." For what reason? They had absolutely no reason to kill the Jewish people. They just couldn't stand the fact that something special and miraculous had. They said, "Well, we're going to get back at God for doing miracles for them. We don't like God. Their very essence is just to fight against godliness, against goodness, against miracles, against anything which is beyond their own human existence." And that's what they want to fight. That's what they're trying to fight against. That concept exists throughout generations, and it's our job to eradicate that. It doesn't sound politically correct. It's not at all politically correct, because in our world, each person has to be judged for whatever it is, and that's true, and that's the way it works. Today's day and age, the mitzvah of eradicating Amalek does no longer apply according to most opinions. Why? Because we don't know who they are. But if you did know who they are, and you could be certain, there's some people that say, "Oh, we know who they are." Okay, good on them. But if you don't know and you can't be certain who they are, you don't have the mitzvah. But understanding fundamentally that if there is an evil existence, there are people that want to do evil and kill for the sake of killing, that must be destroyed. That's something that must be recognized. Okay. I've had my little vent.
No, thank you, Rabbi, because that's exactly the point I wanted to make is the criteria for recognition of Amalek. That's the sticking point. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Right. Yeah, 100%. So the criteria for Amalek today's day and age, it's not known exactly who Amalek is, according to most opinions, and therefore we don't have this mitzvah as a practical mitzvah. We have it as a mitzvah in the sense the mitzvah still exists, but we don't have to go searching for Amalek, trying to find out who's Amalek and to kill them. It's not like we should. If you knew that Amalek was living in the middle of the Caucasian mountains and that there was a tribe over there that they were exactly Amalek, yes, we would have an obligation to go and wipe them out. But according to most opinions, we are no longer certain of who Amalek exactly is, and therefore we do not have that obligation to go and find them. There's no tribe that calls themselves Amalek.
And linking it back to the shiur topic, there's the real issue of with converts, whether Amalek is a DNA transmissible trait. Like if you have a convert becomes Jewish, but is from the Amalek line, like Haman's grandchildren, you see my point?
Yeah. So I would say, I don't know the answer to your question, but this is what I think. I think that it's not a DNA per se thing. In other words, it could be transferred through DNA and it goes generally from father to child. from parent to child in general, but not only. And there's obviously it skips some people, and there are some good people that have come from Amalek, and the conversion is certainly a proof of that. So if they converted to Judaism, I think it suffices to say that while it may be in the DNA, it's not in the spiritual DNA. It's no longer part of the spiritual DNA, which is what we're going to clear to us will be more important than their physical DNA with certainty. But often a physical DNA also gives over a spiritual DNA, which to us, the spiritual DNA will be of more importance. Okay, does that answer that point? Okay, so we got the grandchildren of Haman that have converted, the grandchildren of Sisera. Okay, we have famously two of the great leaders of the Jewish people, the teachers of the famous Hillel, Shammai and Avtalion. Shammai and Avtalion were also descendants of an evil man. They were descendants of Sancheriv. Sancheriv was the man responsible for having exiled the 10 tribes. And not only that, he tried to destroy Jerusalem and the temple in the time of Ezekiel. So you see clearly how he was a major troublemaker, and many Jews lost their connection to Judaism as a result. Nevertheless, we have descendants from Sancheriv that ended up becoming not only converts, but major leaders within the Jewish people. Okay, that's Shammai and Avtalion. So let's look at some of the details about how we're supposed to be caring, or what we consider unique about converts. It says like this: Ger shenitgayer ke tinek shenoiled dami. A ger, a person that converts, is as though they are a newborn child, which means that just like when a newborn child comes into the world, they are lost, they feel uncomfortable, they feel strange, they're coming from a different atmosphere. They've been 9 months in their mother's womb, number one. And prior to that, they were just a soul, not in a physical body. They feel strange in a strange land. They feel out of place. So too, when a person converts, it's as though they're going back in time, so to speak. They feel totally out of place, and it's almost like their life gets renewed. Their halachically, of course, they still have their family, but halachically, their family is no longer their family. And in many cases, practically, they could even lose their family as a result of the conversion. That has happened, of course, to many. Of course, many people convert and they stay in good terms with their family, which is definitely ideal. But some people don't. Some people don't, and that could be problematic. So the first point is that because they feel just like a newborn baby needs extra special care, because they've just come into a new world and they need extra help to be guided and helped to grow into healthy children. The same thing is with a new convert. We have to give extra special help to them. They've taken on a whole new way of life, which is foreign to them. They usually, in order to go through conversion, you have to have been an adult, at least bar and bat mitzvah. And that means that you've changed your whole life in such a drastic way. We have to give them extra care for that reason. The other thing that we've mentioned is that they halachically have no more family. So this could be just halachic, as in they still have connection to the family. But even if they've had a connection to a family, it's different. Before you were singing church rhymes together or whatever it is together, and you're going to the Christmas party, and now you don't really do those type of things together, and you can't really go to their house on Shabbos or whatever it is that cause all those issues. So practically, halachically, there is no longer family. And in old times, for sure, if somebody converted, they would not have had any connection with their family, almost certainly. So that's the other reason why you have to take care of them, just like there's a special mitzvah. When it comes to the orphan and the widow, that because they are lacking in family and they are saddened at their loss, so too you have to recognize that a convert has not only accepted and taken the tremendous step to go through the conversion, transform their whole life, but not only that, their familyless, they've had a massive loss. They lost their entire family in this process, possibly. Definitely spiritually, from a Torah perspective. And therefore, it's as though they have no family. We have to give them extra careful. By the way, the same concept that I mentioned at the beginning, there's a special mitzvah to have love for the orphan and for the widow. And therefore, when you do those mitzvah and you love the orphan and the widow, you will have fulfilled two mitzvahs: the mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew and loving the orphan, loving the whatever it may be, or caring for them. So the same thing over here is when you convert, you take care of the convert, you are fulfilling a double mitzvah. Another interesting reason, which is another reason given, just the different reasons that have been given for why we have to give the special mitzvah, is because as a person that has chosen to join the Jewish faith, just like they've chosen to join, they may feel like they can choose to leave. And therefore, once a person has chosen to join the Jewish people, they're not halachically allowed to leave the Jewish people. They cannot leave. It's like a one-way choice. It's a one-way ticket. There's only a way in, you can't get out. It's like a Jewish person, we say, the Jews are Jews, the Jews are Jews. There's no way of becoming Oish Jew. It will come back to bite you. One of my rabbis used to say, if you went to Tom Pet's Kum, you're screwed for life, which basically means in the Chabad Yeshiva, you learn certain things that make you feel a sensitivity to Hasidut and holiness, that even if you try to run away from it, you'll be screwed. You'll never be able to get it out of your system. The same thing with the Jew. You could never run away from your Jewishness. You're screwed for life. The same thing over here. When a person decides to become a convert, they may not have acknowledged, even though, of course, the responsibility of the Bethlehem that does the conversion is to warn them that, this is for life and it's a big task, and that's why we're so reluctant to take in the converts. But once they have, we have to be extra careful to be kind to them, to remind them and make sure that they don't leave it. Because if you've chosen to go one way, you could feel like you choose the other way. And in theory, they can't. They really can't. They can't move out of it. You can't convert out of Judaism according to Judaism. Okay? So that's another reason for our extra responsibility, because they have that sensitivity that they could feel foreign. And by the way, this is practical. I know, unfortunately, several people that have converted for good reason, and unfortunately they went through a marriage breakdown, or they went through other issues in their life and they felt the community wasn't there for them, or whatever it is, and they left Judaism. And sometimes these people were passionate about it. And you see that, yes, this could happen to a normal Jew just as much. They could get upset or whatever the circumstances and decide the community's not there for them and leave Judaism 100%. In today's day and age, people feel that more than ever, that it's kind of easy to leave Judaism if you feel the need to. So in that sense, that sensitivity has to be there for all Jews, the same sensitivity that you have to convert. But it's a particular sensitivity that we have to have for converts as well.
Rabbi, can I ask a quick question on this very topic about the early Christians, the proto-Christians they're all Jewish. So they were halakhically unable to leave Judaism.
Yeah.
So how many Christians today are actually Jewish?
I hear your question. Yeah, interesting point. Well, as we say, nobody says that Yoshka Pandras, or as other people call him, JC, Jesus, was stopping Jewish. Well, we know that he never, according to most opinions, he actually remained a religious Jew throughout his life. But no matter which version of the story you believe in, he remained a Jew. He was Jewish from beginning to end. And according to most opinions, even most Christian opinions, he even remained a religious Jew throughout his life. Putting that aside, it would be true that some of these people would have had children that would have stayed within the Christian fold and remained and would have been essentially Jewish. I can tell you something which is a separate concept connected to what you're saying, and that is that when you find converts, very often people that are really willing to go through conversion and stick it through all the way, and it's a hard process, and it's meant to be a hard process. Very often, not all cases, but a good percentage, I would say probably around 60% of the time, they will at some point trace themselves back to Jewish people. And it doesn't mean that the people that can't trace themselves back are not connected as well. And I think that that's not for, you could have, there's this lady that used to live here, a Black American lady named Abigail from Alabama. I don't know if you ever met her. Abigail Hasofa, she just got remarried. She lives out in Tzlas. She used to be close with my grandmother. Black lady, Black African American, very, very nice lady. And she wanted to convert, like kind of out of the blue. And what she later found out is that she had some white blood, and that white blood was actually Jewish. And she didn't know why she wanted to convert. She only found that out later on. Now, her story is not unique. Her story is actually common amongst converts, that very often they have some type of, sometimes it's from their father's side, but they have very often a connection inside. So that's how you see even more this concept of a Jew is a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. We could never really be Judaism.
And
as from our perspective, you would need to go through a conversion just because we can't trace you back. But from your perspective, you could even be Jewish prior. Yeah.
I was wondering about that. If someone can trace back through their mother's side halachically to a person who's known to be Jewish, does that exempt them from conversion?
Yes, if the documentation is reliable and acceptable. By the way, today's day and age, they will accept if you have decent evidence of your Jewishness from your mother's side. Of course, evidence on your father's side from a halachic perspective is not worth anything, even though it could mean that you have some spiritual connection. It's nothing from halachic perspective. But if you, let's say, had Jewish evidence of your Jewishness from your mother's side, but you couldn't prove it 100%. Let's say we didn't have all the documentation, or the documentation was totally verified. Then at that point, they will actually rely on DNA. This is something which is a new trend within the rabbinate. Some that's very much in the forefront of this is Rabbi Ullman from Sydney. He's big into DNA, but I say clearly that it's only if it's never used by itself. It's not as though somebody will come and say, hey, I've done a DNA test and it says that on my maternal lineage, I am a Jew, that we will accept it. We will allow them to then go and do research, but they will have to have some type of hard evidence, which is historically accepted as well to back them up. But it does help in cases when we can't get hold of that evidence, but we also have other evidence. In other words, it's there to help, but it can never be a standalone. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So, sorry, you wanted to say that?
Just quickly, if
Yeah.
I can. Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. You're talking about a ger when people don't know why it is that they convert. And the way this whole thing, this whole conversation started is you're saying Hager Sheit Gayer. And the Zohar says it's not Hagoy Sheit Gayer, it says Hager Sheit Gayer, which means Shemilchatchila, that in the first place, every ger had an itzot, had that spark within them that brought them back to Judaism. So in the first place, they belong and they feel like they belong because they were Jewish in the first place. They didn't know that. And so it kind of brings it back to Hager Sheit Gayer, to that. It wasn't a Goy Sheit Gayer, it was a Ger Sheit Gayer, that they had the Jewish ancestry and the Jewish nitzots within them that made them come back. That's it.
100%. And not only that, I appreciate you putting that in. I think the Rebbe told us several times to converts themselves that it's a gerish gayer. So it's the next point I was going to get to as well, that we talk about gerish gayer, a ger that they never called the goyish gayer, and that is because They were just like the souls of all Jews, future Jews, were present on Mount Sinai. Their soul was also present on Mount Sinai, just like the souls of all other Jews in future generations. And therefore, you see that it's not as though it's. By the way, this question, which I was going to get into in a moment, is this point that you've made, is that if a Jewish concept, if we say that a Jew is based on the soul, the question is, how can a person convert? And the answer to that is what you're pointing out, that you can't. The conversion is the process that you have to go through to prove your soul. But you could never get a Jewish soul if you don't have it. That's why it doesn't say Goyish and Geyer, it says Gersh and Geyer, to teach us that every person that actually converts always had the Jewish soul inside of them, but it's only been brought to the front when the person goes through the conversion. Okay, I want to share with you for a moment the Sefer HaChinuch over here. Okay, I'll go through the English just to make it go quicker. The commandment of loving the stranger converts, that we are commanded to love the converts, meaning to say that we be careful not to cause them pain in anything, but rather to do to them good and grant them kindness according to what is proper and is possible. And converts are anyone who connects with us from the other nations, that leaves his religion and enters our religion. About them it says, and you shall love the stranger. And even though the commandment about the Israelite includes him, in other words, even though it's said already that you're supposed to love Havav Yisrael, yeah, as it's stated about him and you shall love your neighbor as yourself, he says, since behold, the righteous commandment is included in your neighbor, Hashem added for us a specific commandment about his love, and so too is a thing in the prevention against cheating him, even though he's included in a man shall not wrong your countryman. In other words, there's so many different laws that apply to all people, but all that is also included in the mitzvah of how you're supposed to treat the convert. Why? So he says, because the Torah wanted to teach us that one who wrongs the convert transgresses, because a man shall not wrong, and because you shall not wrong a stranger. So there's another mitzvah, the negative commandment of not doing wrong to the stranger, not doing wrong to your fellow man. And so too with this, he nullifies the commandment to love your neighbor, and the commandment, and you shall love the stranger. Okay, so it's just going over what I told you before, that there's a double header when you do the mitzvah of loving the stranger, that you also do the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael. Okay, let's learn some of the laws about what it means. So it says as follows. Okay, what are the laws? It says in Bava Metzia that a person not say to a convert, remember your early deeds. What that means, don't remind people that they're converts on a regular basis. People don't want to be reminded that they're converts or that they used to eat pork at some stage. Now, this concept, by the way, does not apply only to converts. It applies to anybody that used to do something and has improved their ways. But in particular, converts are people that definitely were behaving in one particular way and have changed. That which they said that a person not disgrace an Aramean in the presence of a convert until the 10th generation. In other words, it's telling us another law that if you have a person that is from, let's say, the background of that person, or generally Gentile people, it's not the correct thing to make fun of non-Jewish people in general, but particularly when you're in front of a convert, because that's more of a sore point. That's where their family came from. Okay, another thing, and all of this is not to cause pain in this regard, this intensification of love that they focused upon them to the point that they said that the Pasuk equated their love to the love of the omnipresent. It says, if you love the convert, you're loving Hashem. Like it says, and you shall love. And with the love of the omnipresent, you shall love, etc. And that's what it says in the laws of the Mishpatim about the command not to oppress a convert, even with words. Okay, and the rest of the details. So this is telling us, okay. So then he goes on to tell us that this mitzvah applies to all times, whether male or females, anyone that transgresses or causes pain or is negligent in saving them or saving their money or treats their honor lightly, or anything that does not treat them in the proper respect, his punishment is very great. Okay, and we shall learn. So basically, in short, what it is saying is as follows: that we have special ways that, because there's a certain sensitivity that these people have, that it's easier to pick on them. You can even easily tell them, oh, you used to be this person, used to do that. By the way, when Pinchas, the story of Pinchas, he goes and he kills Zimri, the leader of the tribe of Shimon, they were saying, and he stops the plague. What were the people saying? They said, oh, his descendants, by the way, he came from Yisro, Jethro, or he came from Joseph, and Joseph married an Egyptian. So they said, your ancestors were evil. That's why you're doing these evil things. Of course, he was doing holy and good things. But as soon as people have an issue, they start to blame their ancestors. And with the convert, it's an easy pick. It's an easy fight to pick. Mock their history, make fun of where they came from, make fun of what they used to do. So, Fritz, this was the question that you sent me. Why do we need a special mitzvah to do this? And the answer is, you know what? You have to remember, as people, we have to remember that as Jewish people, there's lots of laws that we think about them. Why does the Torah have to make that? Somebody once told me, I don't understand the laws of unity of yichud. Yichud is that you're not allowed to be alone with a person with the opposite gender in particular circumstances. You're not supposed to be alone with another married woman, for example. Married man should be alone with another married woman if there's behind closed doors. It's just not it's actually against Jewish laws. Somebody said to me, like, that's crazy. Like, what do you think people are going to happen? I don't understand what's wrong with shaking somebody saying all these laws. And the answer is, for you, it may not be an issue, that you may not come to falter in these things, but many other people do. So, Fritz, for somebody like yourself, this law may seem to be superficial. What do you need it for? You would never be harmful to a convert. You wouldn't be harmful to anybody, particularly not a convert. But that's you. Unfortunately, there's many people that they look for people that have some type of place to pick on. They have some type of what we call insecurity, and they use that against them. And this is the Torah is giving therefore a special warning, that it's not just the warning against, love your fellow. If you want to not exclude them from love your fellow, or you want to say, they're not really your fellow, they weren't born, whatever type of excuse you're trying to make, the Torah particularly gives us an extra special law to love them, and also not to harm them, it's for those people that like to be a little bit of bullies or abusive or make fun of other people. This law is for those people, and unfortunately those people do exist. Of course not in current present company. Okay, another law that we're supposed to say is not to remind even children that their parents were converts. Of course, if people want to talk about it, by the way, some people are very happy to talk about it. And for us as non-convert, sometimes it could be very inspirational to find out people's stories of how they convert. Whenever I find somebody is happy to talk about their history and where they came from, I often find that they are very, very inspirational Jews. And every Jew I like to learn from, and converts are powerful and inspirational people that have gone through a lot, but they should only share if they are comfortable, but they do have a lot to inspire. So when it says about not making fun, it's interesting. It gives an example. It say you shouldn't say something like, "Oh, the mouth that ate treif is going to now say Torah, going to study Torah," and that's kind of saying like, "Yeah, you're not holy enough to study the Torah." Okay. So one of the Bamidbar Rabbah, the Midrash, gives us an interesting example of why we have this special mitzvah. I hope this will not be taken in the wrong way. The example that they give is an analogy of a deer that decides to join the flock of the sheep of the king. And the king sees that this deer, who is not regularly part of flock, part of his flock, joins the sheep, joins the flock. So he says to his shepherd, "I want you to take extra special care of that deer." And the shepherd says, "I don't understand why." He says, "Because this deer has gone out of its comfort zone. It's used to roaming free. It's used to being able to do other things. And it's come to join the sheep to be part of the king's flock. And he wants to be part of the king's flock. And therefore, you shall give him extra care for his hardship." And therefore, the Midrash says the same thing, is that for a convert to go out of their normal place and to go and change their entire life, to become and join the Jewish people, this is something which is a remarkable idea, and something that we should all be blessed to be in their presence even. And therefore we should have not only take care of them because of their sensitivity, but also take care of them and respect them for their journey and their choice to actually go against their nature to join the Jewish people. Okay. On that point, the Rambam, I think there's a letter from the Rambam where he actually writes a letter to a convert that had written to him. I think that he was going through certain struggles, and the Rambam writes to him literally on these lines, just how special it is that he chose to join the Jewish people. That being said, once again, I'm reiterating that this doesn't mean that we make it easy for people to convert. It's two separate things. We make it easy, so we're good to them only once they've converted, or once the Beth Din has, according to some opinions, by the way, if you know that someone's going through conversion and the Beth Din has given them the green light, so to speak, to start the conversion process, then we have a mitzvah to help them along, because it's a difficult and hard process. And it's not the job of the Beth Din to be there for them. And that's why a lot of people become disenchanted with the Beth Din. And it's a little bit of a catch-22. It's a difficult situation. But we as the community should be there for these people as a support as they are going through their conversion. So another interesting law about this concept is that if a person is a descendant of converts, if both of his parents are converts, then we are obligated to treat them, the mitzvah of V'ahavta Mesager, loving the ger, will apply equally to them. Why? Because they too will not have the family to come with them. All they have is their parents and their immediate family. However, when somebody has one of their parents are Jewish, then according to many opinions, the mitzvah of V'ahavta Mesager does not apply to them. So, Avram Avinu, our first Jewish person that starts the Jewish race, he's the first convert in all of history. The Jewish people went through two conversion processes. Number one, Avram chose to be different in a sense, to accept that he's going to start a new nation. And he did that through doing the 10 tests and ultimately through going through circumcision. We know that one of the things that a male person that wants to convert is they also have to circumcise. The same thing occurred to the Jewish people after they came out of Egypt. Before the giving of the Torah, they all had to immerse themselves in mikveh, men and women, and the men that had not yet had a circumcision before the giving of the Torah, If they wanted to remain part of the Jewish people, they had to have a circumcision. But all people were not officially Jewish until that point. They became Jewish just by the giving of the Torah, even though they were born into the family of Abraham. And the Talmud, and I can't remember the source, but we're told that the reason why Abraham Avinu goes through circumcision at the age of 99 years old, that's when as in Bris Milah, to teach us that it's never too old for a person to change their ways, come back, and even convert. You could be as old as Abraham Avinu and still go through it and still do it.
Rabbi, do we know if the circumcision they did was like just the one drop of blood version?
Well, if they had been previous, you only do tipas hatafas dam, the drop of version. It's not another version. The way it works is that everybody needs a circumcision. Rarely you will have a person that is born without a foreskin. And if that foreskin is totally gone, sometimes it's still a little bit. In most cases, there is still something left, and they still have to do some type of circumcision. Or if a person had a circumcision but not a bris milah when they were a child, their parents took them to a doctor and got their foreskins chopped off, which is common practice throughout the world and used to be even more common practice back in the day. It's become possibly less popular these days because of all the anti-religious talk on the street these days. But back in the day, many people believed it to be of a health benefit, which still most doctors do believe it to be. But more people are scared to just give their children surgeries. Nevertheless, if you have a person that has been circumcised but never did it for the sake of a circumcision, or they were born circumcised, then they do what's called a tapas drama, which is they just let out a drop of blood. That being said, when the Jewish people converted and went through the conversion process before the giving of the Torah, by the way, they would not have done it before the giving of the Torah. I correct myself. They would have done it before they brought the Paschal sacrifice. You're not allowed to bring the Paschal sacrifice if you were uncircumcised. Okay, it's one of the laws of bringing the Paschal sacrifice. So they actually did that part of conversion they did back in Egypt. Some had been doing it throughout the generations, many had not, and the ones that hadn't, they had to do it before they brought the Paschal sacrifice.
So it was a catch-up process, because if Avraham Avinu was, self-circumcised, then that practice would have continued. It was a mitzvah they were aware of.
Right, but we believe that during the slavery, many Jewish people kind of got slack.
The practice lapsed, yeah. And I can understand why, because
I don't think it lapsed 100%. I still think that there was a percentage of people that were doing it, but there was a big percentage that was not, and they had to do it before.
There would have been a cultural pressure against it.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Okay.
With Jewish, there had to have been quite a few different opinions.
Well, that's what they had Moshe. Okay, so that's the process of what we're talking about. But let me tell you, I'll just conclude with two quick stories. The one is a fascinating story about the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, every story about him is fascinating. They say about the story of the Baal Shem Tov that if you believe that all of them actually happened, you're a fool. But if you believe that any of them could not have happened, you're a denier. In other words, the Baal Shem Tov, all the stories that we have about them, most of them probably happened. And even if they didn't, they could have happened. In other words, he would have had the miraculous power to make them happen. But there's a famous story that's written in a book called Sipurim Noiraim, Awesome Stories. And it tells of a story of the Baal Shem Tov once traveling through a town, and he elected to stay in part of the town that was forbidden to Jews to live in, and there was one Jew that was somehow managed to live there, a tailor, and he went to visit the tailor, and the Jewish and the Gentiles, the local Gentiles, find out that there's the group of Jews that are staying in the center of town where Jews are forbidden to live. So they went and tried to arrest them, but when they came and they saw the Baal Shem Tov, they were in awe and they couldn't touch him. And one of the major professors in the city found out about this, and he went to see the Baal Shem Tov. And what did he do? He saw the power and the explanation and the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov that the Baal Shem Tov was teaching. He was so awestruck that he ended up leaving his post, leaving his town, and converting to Judaism. That's one story, but that story is probably just one of thousands like it. But it's a famous story of the Baal Shem Tov. And I'll conclude with the story of Onkelos. Those people that have not yet heard it. It's the famous story, one of my favorite stories growing up. Onkelos was the nephew of the Roman emperor, and I can't remember which Roman emperor it was, but he was, could have been Vespasian, but I'm not sure.
Either Hadrian or Titus. Either Hadrian or Titus, depends who you ask.
Okay, beautiful.
He was the nephew of either Hadrian or Titus. According to Tanhuma, it's Hadrian, but other sites Titus, but we don't know.
Okay, interesting. For some reason, I thought it may have been Vespasian, but Vespasian was the father of Titus. So I think. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it could have, I remember Titus as well. All right. The story was that he came to his father. Onkelos was a very, very smart person, and he was very close with his uncle, who was the emperor of Rome. And the understanding was that he was going to possibly be the successor to his uncle. And his uncle had groomed him to succeed him because of his brilliance, charm, and absolute genius. And one day he told his uncle that before he accepts any leadership post, he wants to travel to find something unique, something that has lost its value, something that is worth a lot but is very cheap. The best business that you can do is with something that most people don't see the value in initially and make money out of sand. Basically take something that has lost its value and show that the sand is really diamonds. So he said to his uncle, I'm going to search for this special material. Anyway, he tells his uncle that he'll be back in a couple of years after he's found the material, going to make a lot of money, etc. His uncle, sure, he praises him, a great idea, go, learn, study, meet the people of the world. But several years pass by and Onkelos has not yet returned. His uncle deeply misses him and wants him to come back, and is worried about him. So he sends an entourage of soldiers to go and look for him. And the soldiers find him, but they meet Onkelos, and Onkelos has meantime converted to Judaism. And Onkelos is such a powerful and passionate person that he starts talking to this entourage of soldiers that had been sent to greet him, to take him, that they themselves end up staying with him, becoming his students and converting. And the message goes back to the emperor that your son has not only converted to Judaism, but he has also converted your soldiers. He's furious. He sends a much more serious brigade, and he tells them, this time don't talk to Onkelos, just take him. So the second entourage goes, and Onkelos manages to say a few words, and it catches their attention, and before they know it, they're converted. And they join Judaism. Not having any other option, the uncle sends his top brigade, and he sends them off they're not allowed to say anything. And as Onkelos is being pulled out of his house, he touches the mezuzah, the doorpost, and they can't help themselves but wondering what the heck did you just do. And they allow him to speak, and he talks about the power of the mezuzah, and he says to them, you protect your king, your emperor, but in Judaism, our emperor protects us, our king protects us. And this catches them off guard, and they are curious to hear more about this. Eventually, Titus has to go and meet him himself, to which he does, and he tells him, listen, I just want you to come back. Just tell me, what is it? What did you find over here? He says, I'll tell you. You told me that I should find something that is cheap and underpriced, and that's the most value. I found something that is cheap. The Jewish nation, the Jewish people, they're underpriced. Their value they're below value, and I've decided to join them, and I'm getting absolute value for my money. There's nothing been more worthwhile in my entire life. Of course, Onkelos ends up making the first translation on the Torah, the Aramaic translation of Turgum Onkelos, to which we was the first thing printed in our Chumashim from the famous convert Onkelos. And not only that, we are obligated that once a week when we go over the Torah portion, we are supposed to do it with the translation. And of all translation, which one are we supposed to use? The translation of none other than Onkelos. Okay, so that's our discussion for tonight. And I want to thank you for joining. That was the mitzvah of loving the converts. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good night.
Thank you, as always, and we'll see you hopefully soon.
Please God. I hope Thursday there'll be a shiur, and maybe we'll even be able to have shul this Shabbos. Who knows? Waiting for the announcement tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Just,
Bye
okay.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Shak.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Noach.
Excellent show. Thank you.